Brett Bielema and the Illinois Fighting Illini earned praise, respect, and a much-needed jolt of energy for their program when they beat the top 25 Nebraska Cornhuskers on the road in a ranked Big Ten Conference matchup. For the Nebraska Cornhuskers and Matt Rule, it's yet again another game where victory is within grasp, but the Huskers failed to take victory for themselves. And while this team, I believe, and I think anyone who is an objective analyst will say the same, they are different from previous Nebraska teams, and they are better. But some of the same issues that plagued Scott Frost teams and that plagued Matt Rule's 2023 Nebraska team reared their ugly head in this Friday night matchup. This was, in my opinion, the game of the week, or certainly a finalist for the game of the week. And so far, it may be up there for the game of the year. But before I get into breaking that down, that 31-24 intense overtime matchup, I want you, yes you, to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, to click the notification bell, comment your reaction and analysis to this game down in the comment section below. Share this video and channel around to other college football fanatics like us who are invested in the game, who care a lot about our teams and the sport of college football as a whole. Check out my Patreon page and sign up as an All-American or Heisman member if you want access to my weekly college football picks for who's going to win each matchup that features a Power 4 team, and also picks against the spread for those games. And hitting that notification bell, subscribing to the channel, liking the video, commenting, doing all of those things, and joining our Discord server, which the link to that and the Patreon page are in the description and also down below in the pinned comment. Those things help out the channel a lot, and they also help you out a lot. So please do them. But let's talk about this matchup. This game was a needed victory for both programs. It was a top 25 game. Nebraska was hosting, but if Illinois was hosting, that wouldn't have changed much other than the point spread, and maybe Illinois comes out on top in regulation instead of overtime. This was a very back-and-forth game, very evenly matched teams. I mean, from the gate, out of the gate, Illinois scored, Nebraska responded, then Illinois would respond. These teams were in a ring, and they were boxing back and forth, winning rounds, each of them winning rounds. It was a very balanced game. I mean, both teams had more than 300 yards, but less than 400. Both had more than 20 first downs, or more than 19 first downs, because Nebraska had 20, but less than 26. They about broke dead even in time of possession, had similar third down conversion numbers. Both quarterbacks threw for 3 touchdowns or more, and Raiola's one interception really wasn't his fault. Altmaier didn't throw a single pick. It was just a very back-and-forth good game. It was a must-have game, which makes a loss for Nebraska, or if Illinois happened to lose this game, which was very likely given it went to overtime, is painful. Like, it would have been painful no matter who lost, and it's very painful for Nebraska, a great win for Illinois. But regardless, neither team should be hanging their head and weeping over this performance. Both played like good Big Ten teams. But Illinois won, and a great way to visualize how Illinois won and how the game went is looking at the game and the statistics and the numbers from a bird's eye view. Illinois had 5.9 yards per play. Nebraska had 5.2 yards per play. And you look also at the points per play. Illinois was scoring nearly, if you round up the 0.456 points per play, if you round it up to 0.5, they were scoring nearly a half point per play. Nebraska, on the other hand, was scoring 0.329 points per play. Now, this is not obviously a 100% guarantee that Nebraska was going to lose. Like, if I gave you these numbers in the pregame, it would indicate that, yeah, Illinois probably covers that 9.5-point spread, which is where the line closes. Illinois is more competitive than most, including myself, expected. But there is a world where you factor those numbers in, and if Nebraska maybe gets like a pick six, or they get, a turnover of some kind, or maybe Illinois more likely just has a few plays where they score big, but then a ton of 3-and-outs. Meanwhile, Nebraska's a ton of plays, averages like 4 yards, 5 yards per play, but no big plays, all very methodical, slow drives, and they come out winning. So like these statistics are valuable. They tell a large part of the story, not the whole story, but you can already see in these basic statistics, just yards per play and points per play, and also total yardage, that Illinois was slightly ahead of Nebraska in very important areas. And then you look at areas that can be random, depending on games, like turnovers are viewed by analysts and by experts as pretty random throughout games. Nebraska actually won the turnover battle. They did. They were +1 in the turnover battle. However, they had 9 penalties for 89 yards. Illinois had 3 penalties for 20 yards. The only thing Nebraska won in this game from an efficiency standpoint was the turnover battle. That was it. Illinois was 7 of 13 on third down. Nebraska was 8 of 15, basically identical, but Illinois slightly ahead. Illinois had 25 first downs to Nebraska's 20, and while averaging more yards per play, that tells you that Illinois was more efficient on probably both offense and defense, or that much more efficient on offense, which at the end of the game kind of was the case. And then you look at fourth down efficiency. Illinois 2 of 3, Nebraska 0 of 1. And Illinois was 2 of 2 on fourth down efficiency, I do believe, and Nebraska was 0 of 1 when you look past the first half. I think Illinois went for it on fourth down in the first half and failed. Then they went for it 2 times in the second half and succeeded, I do believe. So halftime adjustments were something else to look at in this matchup, where Illinois was superior there. They had the better second half adjustments. They were down, remember, 17-10, if not for that Torrey Cox Jr. interception where he stripped it right out of Isaiah Nayer's hands. It could have been 24-10 at the half. Nebraska looked like, while Illinois was going to compete with them more than some expected throughout the game, it looked like they were going to pull away at halftime. Well, that's not what happened. And on this show, we talk about the losers first. We save the best for last, get all the ick out of the way first, and then talk about the winner. We save the best for last. So let's start off with Nebraska. They have got to be tougher. They have to be. Their back broke in overtime. Let me show you the overtime series. So 24-24. Keep in mind, Nebraska's defense forced a punt from Illinois. Illinois was driving down the field. It looked like they were in position to take it away in regulation. The black shirts, who had struggled all day, stepped up. If that doesn't give the team some momentum, a reason to believe, I don't know what does. You look at overtime, and Illinois, 2 plays, 25 yards, touchdown. And what was scary about that is Illinois had their longest rush of the day, a 21-yard Caden Fegan run. And I believe they used misdirection there, but the whole Nebraska defense looked disheveled. They were caught off guard. They had done much better against the run all day compared to the pass. And at the end of the game, Illinois was beginning to run and keep Nebraska's defense even more on their heels. And then in overtime, 21-yard run by Fegan, and then a play action by Luke Altmaier, and he threw it wide open 4 yards to Pat Bryant. And Pat Bryant he's phenomenal. He's one of the Big Ten's better wide receivers. And Altmaier right now is one of the Big Ten's better quarterbacks. So that happened. And then Nebraska gets the ball, and Raiola gets sacked. Actually, before that, you have a false start. So 1st and 15 from the 30, sack, 2nd and long, then another sack. It's like 3rd and 42, I think is what it was, or 3rd and 38. I forget what the exact yardage was, but it was crazy. Raiola looked flustered. He looked like he didn't know that you're supposed to throw it away when no one's open. He was trying to play hero ball, carry the team like he had been for the entire game, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And it all fell apart. And then the 4th down, where he was sacked, the offensive line couldn't protect him, and I forget who exactly it was. I think it may have been Dylan Rosiak. Linebacker just came right up the middle, dropped him at about the 50, Nebraska's 45, game over, 31-24. The team just imploded. I don't necessarily want to use the term quit. That makes it sound like Illinois didn't take the game, and that's not giving enough credit to Illinois. And I think Nebraska is tougher than they used to be, both physically and mentally under Rule, compared to Frost or compared to where they were last season. But they still broke. They broke down. When you look, and I know that rushing yards aren't adjusted for sacks. You have to do that manually, or I have to, you have to, if you want to, look at honest rushing yards, because sacks should not be subtracted from rushing yards. They should be counted. Like, there should be, team rushing and then team sack yards lost. Like that, they should be separate statistics. It's frustrating. But anyway, Nebraska finished the day, when you adjust for sacks, which Raiola had negative 52 rushing yards from all of those sacks. They had 50 rushing yards, only averaging 1.2 yards per carry. And even if you were not to adjust for sacks, Dante Dowdle only ran for 3.6 yards per carry with a long of 14. So Nebraska's rushing offense was not dominant. It was able to keep Illinois' defense honest at first, but it got progressively worse as the game went along. Illinois' defense was, again, like the whole team, they made second half adjustments, and they were confusing Raiola at times. And you look here, and Illinois' 3-4 defense is legit. Aaron Henry did a very good job. Nebraska, taking out sack yardage, had 25 carries for 102 rushing yards. So about 4 yards per pop. And the sacks obviously kind of offset that, because if you have a good run, but then let's say your quarterback's sacked, well, you're back to where you started. So there is some logic to including sack yardage and rushing yards, but I don't think it's that strong. However, you pay attention to the fact that Nebraska had 2 sacks, 2 TFLs. Illinois had 5 sacks and 7 TFLs and 168 rushing yards, and that's not adjusted for sacks either. They're 168 rushing yards. And the fact that they had 2 runs of over 20 yards. So they were the more explosive rushing attack and also the more consistent rushing attack. They had the superior pass protection, the superior run blocking, the superior pressure rate. They were just better in the trenches. And that's how you win in the Big Ten. It was Nebraska who actually, for much of this game, looked like they had the better skill position players or the more talented team, and Illinois was just the grittier, gutsier, better conditioned team. In the sense that, to use the game that's decided the Big Ten for the previous few years, the game, it looked like Nebraska was a bit of Ohio State and Illinois was a bit of Michigan. And while Ohio State has been an elite team for the previous several years, and so has Michigan, Michigan's come out on top because of their superior physicality. Illinois was the tougher team, the physically superior team, and they were mentally tougher as well. So that's something that Matt Rule and the staff have to go back to the drawing board on. And it's honestly, that ties in with the missed field goal and the decision to kick that field goal. John Hull shanked one from longer than 30 yards, and it was a 4th and 3 that Nebraska, honestly, whether running the ball or passing it, probably could have picked up. So what was that all about? I don't exactly know, because I'm not in the coach's head, but just something to think about. You look at Dylan Raiola and how he I think bailed out Rule. He came very close to bailing out what was a poorly managed game, or at least poorly managed series, plural. For example, look at the drive entering halftime. Nebraska is not using timeouts. They're chewing clock. It honestly looks like they're just being conservative and setting up to take a field goal, to take a 13-10 lead in the half, which if they did that, they would have lost in regulation. But Raiola instead sees the field, scrambles around in the pocket, maneuvers himself, sets his feet, and makes an amazing throw to none other than Isaiah Neyor to score a touchdown with less than 30 seconds remaining in the half. I mean, let's take a look at that drive. Play by play. It was Nebraska's final drive. 9 plays, 70 yards, 3 minutes, 6 seconds. They had 3 minutes and 22 seconds on the clock to drive down, and they were chewing, and I mean chewing clock. With 23 seconds left in the half, they were at the Illinois 38 on a 3rd and 6. No hurry at all. That is, whether it's Marcus Satterfield, whether it's Matt Rule, Glenn Thomas, that is not the proper way to manage a game. Like, go down and get the touchdown. You have the talent, you have the quarterback, and 3rd and 6 from 38 with your kicker situation means that even if you pick that up, if you don't get a big play, there's a chance you come up empty before halftime. And Raiola, with his talent, was able to, quite frankly, bail them out and give them that touchdown there. And Jamal Banks, Isaiah Neyor, Thomas Fidone, they did very well. Dante Dowdle did, I think he did a fine job given the offensive line and some of the injuries and inconsistencies there. The end of half clock management was ridiculous. Yes, I know that Raiola overthrew a wide open receiver in the 3rd quarter, overthrew Luke Lindenmeyer for what would have been a touchdown, and that's how, well, the field goal was set up. That was shanked. But no quarterback is perfect. And he's a freshman. The fact that he's making those throws where he's, eluding pressure, where he's dodging incoming defenders and preserving his time in the pocket, extending the life of the pocket, and then scoring touchdowns, that's something to be thankful for. Honestly, most 5-star true freshmen, even some phenomenal players in college football history, were not making those throws and those plays at this age with this level of experience. And overall, don't blame Raiola. Look at the defense, which looked anemic in defending the pass. Look at the offensive line. Look at the play calling. All of those things. I mean, Tony White, as corn-crazed and many of his followers said, kind of got exposed. I mean, Luke Altmaier is good, and Pat Bryant, I think, is a near elite, perhaps elite wide receiver, future NFL receiver, and Zachary Franklin's good too, and their offensive line really stepped up and persevered. Illinois did. We'll get to them in a few minutes. But the defensive backs were constantly out of place. I'm seeing guys, even on plays in which Illinois threw an incomplete pass or Altmaier got sacked, where Illinois receivers are wide open. There was someone open on every play for Illinois. It's why Altmaier had nearly a 200 passer rating and about an 80 QBR. I saw 2 or 3 possible conversions that were dropped or missed in a rare instance that Illinois could have easily picked up on 3rd down. So that's that. Raiola, look, he did very well. Phenomenal job in my mind. Just listen to these numbers. 24 of 35, 297 yards, 3 touchdowns, a pick, and that ball was placed perfectly to Isaiah Neyor. If he comes down with that, that's another several yards and another touchdown. And we're talking about 24 of 35 for over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no picks. But Torrey Cox Jr. ripped the ball out of Neyor's hands, and that right there was the epitome of this game, where Nebraska has the higher talent ceiling. They may even finish the year being the better team. They have more talent. They have superior athletes. That's why they were able to make several of those plays over and over again, like one-on-one or in tight situations where a lot of Illinois' completions and plays were schemed. That's the difference. Illinois had the better coaching staff. Nebraska had the better talent. And talent is talent. But the coaches, the strength and conditioning, and the mentality, which is further reinforced by coaches in the game plan, that reinforces toughness. That is why Torrey Cox Jr. was able to rip that ball out, knowing I can't defend that. The only way I can make this play positive for my team is just using all of my weight and all of my strength to rip that ball out, and hopefully it can be called an interception and not dual possession, because then that's just a touchdown for the offense nonetheless. Great play by Cox. It was the epitome of this game, where Illinois was just the tougher team that hung around, slowly wore out Nebraska, and frustrated them into making more and more mistakes, and then Nebraska just broke. The Cornhuskers allowed 215 yards on 21 completions and 27 attempts. Those were Altmaier's numbers right there. 215 on 27 attempts, 4 touchdowns, and they were +1 in turnovers and lost, which shows they were not taking advantage of their situation. When you win the turnover battle and lose, not that good. Not good. Illinois, meanwhile, they're a good Big Ten team. They're 4-0, 1-0, and they do have a solid squad. The Illini, I think, can win 8 or 9 games. 6 and 7 right now, like 6 or 7 wins. That has to be an expectation in Champaign. And this team, while experienced, still has a lot of eligibility. So Illinois next year could be a team that, from a preseason point of view, looks to be very, very impressive. Pat Bryant had 5 receptions for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. Altmaier had a good game. Caden Fagan had 12 carries for 69 yards, averaged close to 6 yards per carry. Josh McCray, Aiden Lowry, Khalil Valentine, they got involved. So Illinois showed they have depth at a variety of positions. And special teams was another, it was something I mentioned in my 5 reasons why Illinois will win this game video. I predicted Nebraska to win, and I was wrong there. But for these games that interest me, and Nebraska versus Illinois interested me, and it was obviously a big game, I like to cover both sides and show that, hey, if I believe both teams can win, here's why both teams can win. And for Illinois, it was Luke Altmaier and his receivers. Those were the top 2 reasons. It was special teams that could give Illinois an edge. And also the fact that Illinois has beaten Nebraska in Memorial Stadium before. And Brett Bielema is known, at least with his time in Champaign at Illinois, to, go on the road in 2021 and earn wins over Minnesota and Penn State. Teams that were ranked ahead of them, that were favored ahead of them. And he beat them. And there was one other reason which I exactly forget, if I'm being honest. But wide receivers, quarterback, special teams, team toughness, and courage were 4 of my 5 reasons. And all of those came alive for Illinois. All of them did. They won the penalty battle. They won the special teams battle. Their kicker made his sole field goal. Their punter was able to pin Nebraska inside the 20. They had a 50-yard kick return. They were able to return punts fairly effectively. And outside of Brian Buschini for Nebraska, not much went right for the Cornhuskers on special teams. It was a very underrated reason why the Illini were in this game, why they won it. And Barry Looney Jr. throwing that touchdown pass, he didn't throw it, but he designed the play where Altmaier threw the touchdown pass to none other than offensive tackle Brandon Henderson. That was gutsy. That was genius. I mean, he was wide open. No one was covering him. And the way where Illinois' receivers were open all the time against a defense that, look, has had its struggles this year, but is still, I believe, a great defense, potentially a near elite defense, that's impressive. So this is a good team, and the numbers back it up. They have a 0.197 points per play margin, which is 27th nationally, and they've played Kansas, who despite being 1-3, I think is a, average team in college football. And if you look at the FBS and not just the power conference, it's probably an above average or good team. I think that not Kansas, but Nebraska, I think that the Cornhuskers are a good team. I still think they could be a top 25 team, honestly, in power ratings. And Illinois beat them. And then they convincingly beat Eastern Illinois. And they convincingly beat Central Michigan. They're plus 7.6 in S&P Plus, which they're 46th there. And they're plus 5.5 in FPI. They're 40th there. And finally, Brett Bielema outcoached Matt Rule, as we've already talked about. His coaching played right into Illinois physically breaking and pounding the Cornhuskers. That's what you witnessed in this game, is Brett Bielema is still Brett Bielema. He knows how to motivate his team. He knows how to get them up and put on a physical performance. Illinois out-physicaled Nebraska on the offensive line, the defensive line, at linebacker. I mean, honestly, perhaps even at tight end. I mean, Illinois had a pretty impressive performance at tight end. Nebraska did too, but the Illini were right there. And you see that with 7 of 13 on third down, 2 of 3 on fourth down, one of those fourth down conversions directly leading to a touchdown on that play, and also Illinois having the more aggressive mindset. Going for it on fourth down as often as they do. Not settling for field goals when they feel like a touchdown can really drive it home and can really give them the momentum. And the way that they were just attacking Nebraska's defensive tackles. And USC did the same thing against Michigan. USC just really failed at it outside of one play. Illinois eventually succeeded. They eventually were able to attack Nash Hutmacher and Ty Robinson and have success against them. They trusted their offensive line, and they kept Nebraska's defensive line in front honest with their performance in the passing attack. And they made impressive second half adjustments. From the start of the third quarter onward, Illinois outscored Nebraska 21-7. That's impressive. And the fourth quarter was the first point in the entire game where Illinois was favored to win by ESPN's FPI win probability machine. I mean, Illinois was clearly not just in this in the fourth quarter, but really it felt like they could have taken the momentum and even taken the game away in the fourth. And it didn't happen in the fourth, but they had enough juice going into overtime where then they took over the game in overtime and won. With Nebraska having superior talent and being at home and statistically performing better through their first 3 weeks than Illinois did, this was a really impressive coaching job by Brett Bielema. Really impressive. And finally, my MVP for this game is quarterback Luke Altmaier. Went 21 of 27 for 215 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also scrambled for 21 yards. He had a 193.6 passer rating and an 83.9 quarterback efficiency rating. Right now, Luke Altmaier, 862 passing yards on the season, 10 touchdowns, no picks, a 73.8 QBR. He also has a 171.8 passer rating. He's been only sacked 7 times. He's completing over 70% of his throws. He's one of the Big Ten's better quarterbacks right now. And good for him, good for Illinois. And we'll see where Illinois goes this season. We'll see where Nebraska goes. What these teams have to do, though, is mostly for Nebraska, win a few more games that will or could be toss-ups. Like Nebraska has Rutgers, and they have Indiana, and USC and Iowa will be tough matchups as well. The Ohio State game at this point is probably an automatic loss, but you never know, and you always want to try hard. And as for Illinois, they do play Oregon on the road. That'll be a pretty tough game. That could be similar to Nebraska versus Ohio State, but they have games against Michigan. The Illini, have a game against they have a game against Rutgers, for example, and I think they may actually have a game against Indiana too. No, they don't, but they play Penn State next weekend, and that could also be another kind of auto loss type game. But overall, these teams are in a position still for Nebraska and obviously for Illinois to have a very successful season. Nebraska just has to go back to the drawing board and really fix some things on defense and also figure out their offensive line, because that offensive line is going to be eaten up by a lot of Big Ten defensive lines, just from what I've seen against Illinois and also from what we know Nebraska's offensive line was last season. And as for Illinois, they have to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, staying within striking distance against the teams they play and coming out with wins because of their coaching. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488 and Nebraska Rascal for being Heisman members and sponsoring this video and channel. Thanks to Chris Lane, Counter Little OH, Ismar Tyler 9, Chilton Kush for being All-American members and sponsoring this video and channel. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for sponsoring this video as all conference patrons. If you want to support the channel, check out my page via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And also there's my merchandise store, which is also in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Have a great day, guys. Go Fighting Illini, and go Big Red.